recovery. Allen Iverson yesterday announcing that he is 6 months sober. He did it on CBS this morning, or CBS Mornings, or whatever the hell they're trying to call it now to get people to watch. But Iverson went on that show, and it was amazing. Now, you have to understand, if you're not familiar with like the lifestyle of Allen Iverson, like, you know, we talking about practice stuff, that was actually born out of Allen is out all night, right? Like all night, drinking, God knows what else, but he shows up to the facility on game day and plays his ass off, right? So that was Allen's whole thing. Like, why do I have to go to practice? You know, and obviously that whole thing was a runaway train. Like, he would tell you that today. And there was a lot going on in his life the day that happened, like personal hardship. But he definitely, I mean, he would tell you he got wrapped around the practice thing and just kind of wouldn't let it go. And he understands why it's hilarious too. But he was living like just full flight from reality, really. That's what we say about people who are like hardcore alcoholics. Like, you know, he was just living in his own world. And, you know, that can, I think when you're young, and he talked about this on CBS this morning, you know, he's in his 50s now, right? And when you're young, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, but I sure as hell love going to the club and trading in on any kind of status my job gave me to have a good time and to keep the party going, right? And then at some point, you know, normal people bail on that because they want to go on with their life and be responsible because that's what is in their bones and their DNA. You know, from my experience as an alcoholic, like it goes back to the Sanchez thing, like the sun goes down, people go home, you're out all night. And there are people like you who will go out all night with you. And certainly if you're Allen Iverson, you're not going to have a hard time finding those people, right? And he talks about it. He talked about it with Stephen A. Smith, and he talked about it on CBS, how it was just he screwed his life up post-basketball. Like a lot of bad decisions, a lot of not showing up for important business meetings, blowing people off, a lot of behavior that he's not proud of. And he said that he sees this in some of the people he still hangs with today that he loves. And he was like, look, I'm not talking bad about these people, but I see when they drink how they get inebriated and what happens to them. And I think to myself, that was me. You know, that was me. And I think that's like super interesting that he is able now to reflect on that. And what else is interesting is that, you know, he's leading with I'm sober 6 months. He's got a memoir coming out and he has a documentary coming out, both of which I will devour. But if there was a guy that you would, you know, I talk about it all the time, but, you know, just to give some background, I don't know who's watching this for the first time. Like I did PR in the NBA for about 7 years and I took over for Kevin Fisher, who was on who watches our show. Fish left. He went to the Women's Tennis Association. So I was lucky enough to get his job. And I showed up the year after Iverson had left. Now, when he left, there's that video they call B-roll, right? Where it's like his last conversation with Mo Cheeks, where Allen was apparently out gambling all night long and missed all kinds of team events. We're in the, you know, it's like October, November, early in the season. And Mo Cheeks is just like, yo, man, just get yourself and get out of here. And Allen was kind of like, what, really? And Mo was like, just get out of here. And they had decided that they had enough and they traded him. They ended up trading him to Denver. But like, that's another thread, right? Like if Allen was anywhere near in control, and I'm not on him for not being, because I would have been the same exact way, but you got to think he may have had more fruitful relationships with guys like Mo Cheeks, who he loved, and wouldn't have disappointed people like that. When you get sober, you do have a lot of shame because you did a lot of stuff that you regret. And I think that when you listen, I think the main reason I wanted to share with you guys this stuff is because I'm not here to say I am the ultimate inventory taker of like who is sober and who is not. Like you'll never know. Somebody will be sober in front of you for 2 years and you won't know that they've stopped drinking until they tell you. Somebody who you thought was hopeless, you'll be like, holy crap, I can't believe this person got rid of that stuff in their lives and how well they're doing now, right? And then there's a circumstance too where me as someone who's been around sobriety for long enough to know when somebody is like really glowing. Like Allen Iverson has that glow. And to hear him talk so honestly, so authentically from his heart, which he always did. Like the guy was never inauthentic, right? But you hurt for him a little bit because you knew there was pain deep down. Like, this is a guy who I remember reading the Sports Illustrated article when I don't know who the writer was, I forget, but it was a feature on him, and he goes back to his home in Hampton, Virginia. And he's literally like walking over people that were at his house or his mom's house. And he turns to the writer and he's like, it's not the way it should be, but it's the way it is. Like, and that's how he grew up. Like, think about that. Like, like I was lucky enough to grow up in a house with heat, like Allen Iverson at times did not have that. And his mom tried to soldier on as best she could as a single mom. But like the guy he wasn't dealt a full house, dude, so you can't expect someone like that to walk through society buttoned up and behaving appropriately or as to what the standard of appropriate behavior is. I remember right after he got drafted by the Sixers, he got busted with gun and marijuana in a car. It was like the summer before his rookie year. And I was like so bummed that I remember Pat Croce, by the way, was a huge part in that whole thing because the Sixers, Allen was at odds with Larry Brown. Billy King was the GM. I should actually maybe have Billy on at some point because I would consider Billy a friend. I work for him at Philly. But Billy King was the GM, right? And, Pat Croce kind of got in the middle because Allen and Larry couldn't stand each other. Larry wanted to trade Allen. Billy was like, I don't know what the hell to do, really, because Billy got along with Allen well enough, but he always had Larry in his ear trying to get him to trade him. And the Sixers were going to trade him, but there was a no trade clause that kept Allen, and it wasn't Allen's no trade clause. It was the bald guy. I can't remember the big. I can't remember. I can't remember his name. The big bald guy who was really important for the Sixers. Anyways, he would not waive his no trade clause. So he blew up the deal. Allen stays. And then the Sixers figure out a way to win. But it was a guy like Pat Croce who was able to be the middleman. I say all this to say, like, there was always something going on with Allen, and there was always drama, and there was always people like Pat Croce trying to figure it out, right? A million Pat Croces. But ultimately, like, if you'd seen Allen recently and like you kind of were like, man, I don't want that guy to die. Like, that's what I would think because he was such a superhero to so many of us that grew up loving the Sixers. And for him to be on a journey, and look, like, again, this is how recovery works. Like, it's day by day, and you could fall off and then you get back on. Like, I think with all the stuff out there, like fentanyl and whatnot, and like heroin, like the stakes are really high. So it's tough to say to somebody, well, if you relapse, it's part of the process. Like, well, now if you relapse, you can die. Like, I have the old AA Big Book is right up there, right? Like in that book, that's like, for me, that was like the blueprint to getting sober. But up in that book, it talks about try some controlled drinking if you think you're not an alcoholic. That was written in 1939. Like, it's an absolute work of art, or literally, I think it's God's work. That book, the way it impacted me. But like, you also have to use your head. Like, well, that's telling somebody to go back out and try controlled drinking is a little different, right? Like if heroin and fentanyl was their issue. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind when you say relapse is part of the process. You got to be careful about that, but it is part of the process, unfortunately. So I'm stoked about Allen Iverson. That's the news about Mark Sanchez. Gosh, can we talk about sports now? Yes, Ty Detmer is coming back on the other side of the break. We're expecting him to. He's at 11:05. Scotty's smiling over there. Scotty, don't worry. You're gonna get your Who Needs Daniel Stark in. All right. After we talk to Ty.
I'm gonna keep the stream on so I get it.